Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. You want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. Let's talk some college football. So I was thinking about USC and texting some friends, and I said, if you go look at college football, let me name the 6 or 7 best programs the last 8 or 9 years. LSU, Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Brian Kelly's Notre Dame teams, Clemson, Oklahoma a little bit, but I wouldn't quite put them in that class. And I said the one thing and Oregon's up there. The one thing they've had in common, it's not corners and receivers, it's not quarterbacks. They recruit the best large men. Oregon, as you well know, Penei Sewell's another example. I've watched Oregon play twice this year. John, they are big. They are Michigan big. They are a big team. Washington's talented. They don't look like Oregon, okay?
No.
USC has not recruited big people. When the best recruiter on your staff is a defensive back coach, you're in trouble. When Pete was there, the best recruiter was Ed Orgeron, right? USC is small. And Lincoln Riley is out here calling plays. That's how micro USC has been. They have fallen in love with Sark and Kiffin and play callers and play designers. USC is compared to Oregon is a small football team. And I've watched them over the course of the last several years. And I said, their best recruiter, every college staff has a guy who just recruits. He can't coach. He can recruit. USC's best recruiter is a defensive back coach. Don't know how good of a coach he is, but the guys in the secondary, certainly they've plateaued. They don't get better. When people look at USC's issues, I just keep saying the same thing. And I was told this by an NFL coach 3 years ago who was out of work briefly. I met at a practice. He goes, they just don't look like Ohio State. They don't look like Texas. Even average Texas teams were big, 6'7" O-line. USC has one defensive lineman, Bear Alexander, who will play on Sunday. It's rush ends. It's 275-pound defensive lineman. So my takeaway is Lincoln's into this wizardry of play calling. It doesn't matter. They had Sark and Kiffin. They've always had good play callers. That's Arizona and Jed Fish. What makes you a 7-8 top 10 program is big guys up front.
It hit me yesterday. Think about the dynasties in college football, right? The last 15 years, Nick Saban, defensive guy. The current one rolling, Georgia hasn't lost in forever, defensive guy. In the 2000s, Pete Carroll, defensive guy. Watch Michigan now. Harbaugh's a former quarterback, but he probably wishes he could have played defensive tackle. Urban Meyer was an offensive line guy, an offensive guy. He was wide receiver coach, but he doesn't feel that way, right? He feels like a tough guy in the trenches, and that's how he built his teams. Bob Stoops, defensive guy. And you watch Lincoln, and I've been saying this forever, you are who your mentors are in football, because when you're young, it really shapes who you are. Now, it doesn't mean you can't put your own spin on things, but he's a Mike Leach guy. He's a Mike Leach guy. Saban is a Belichick guy. Kirby is a Saban guy, right? I mean, right. Think about that. And you watch Kyle Whittingham's another guy who is wired like a tough guy. Who did he work for? Urban Meyer. What that program has probably, I don't even think it gets enough respect for. They were in the WAC 15 years ago, and what they have become they've gone to the Rose Bowl back-to-back years because he values the trenches. And when I think about those Pete Carroll teams, it was the offensive and defensive line. And I mean, that's what Pete still to
and
this
linebackers, physical, big, like bruising, blitzing linebackers.
Can you imagine Lincoln having a trio of Ray Maluga, Brian Cushing, and Clay Matthews?
And Rivers. They had the other kid, Rivers.
Yeah, because Cushing, or was it Matthews, didn't even start the 1 year, right? Yeah. He was a backup. And people like, this guy might be the best prospect, and he's the backup. So, yeah, I just can't. Even at Oklahoma, his best teams were all fully loaded at the skill guys, and the quarterback, Kyler Baker, Mixon, CeeDee Lamb, Hollywood Brown, Mark Andrews. But defense was the reason they couldn't win it. They had a championship level offense, but they were soft on defense. I don't think you fake that. Well, that's who you are. That's what you recruit. It's what you see in recruiting, because he was trained through his first 10 years of football as a player, and then he went into coaching even before he was done by Leach. And what, to me, that it's kind of like the Mike D'Antoni of football. Offense, 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 offense. Well, that's never going to win. It didn't win 20 years ago. It doesn't win now because you're going to have to play Kirby. You're going to have to play Nick. You're going to have to play Ohio State or Michigan. Both those two teams have NFL guys everywhere.
Here's something else. You never see Tennessee may lose, but Mike, players are respectful, almost intimidated by the physical presence of Vrabel. Same with Tomlin. Same with Dan Campbell. I mean, if I said to you who plays hardest in the league, I could say Pittsburgh and Detroit. Yeah. Those players respect that Dan and Mike Tomlin are men. When you watch Alabama, when they struggled early this year, they played their ass off. They were just incredibly limited at quarterback. Jim Harbaugh's team play hard. USC against UCLA in the biggest game for the school and the alumni mailed it in. They don't respect Lincoln. Lincoln is very 2023. It's like media people. It's treat the player great. And it's all about the player. And it's all about the play calling. I thought the effort by USC was disrespectful to the coaching staff at USC. Chip Kelly's on the hot seat. That team was high-fiving, fist-pumping, jumping up and down, played with incredible intensity. USC acted like they didn't want to be there. And to me, that goes back to the coach. If you have limitations, I mean, Chip's got some limitations at quarterback right now. There's not a lot he can do, right? You and I watch certain teams, and you just say, there's limitations for Pete Carroll. What is he going to do at quarterback when Geno's out and Drew Lock comes in? There's nothing you can do. If I was a USC administrator or a booster, like that team, they didn't respect Lincoln. That was an absolutely lethargic effort.
We talked about it last week. You know my thoughts on geographically, the fit. I think it's clearly really weird. I think there's a mercenary element because a lot of times in college football, when I get a star coach, I get him from another program that's not on my level. Like Florida got Urban from Utah. USC got Pete Carroll. He was out of work. Washington got Chris Peterson from Boise. It means a lot to them. Like when you look at Kirby Smart or Nick Saban, Ryan Day, or obviously Jim Harbaugh, their program means everything. Usually you don't get Oklahoma to USC, right? You would go from, I don't know, like in Arizona State, you win 12 games back-to-back years, and then USC gets you. And it means a lot to you. You watch Lincoln Riley, he's there for one reason only. They gave him $120 million. Yeah. And there's an apathy to me when you watch the program. I had a scout tell me he thinks going to a lot of these programs, and he's been on the road for 20 plus years, the rivalries are not the same with all the transferring. It used to be embedded in you, right? Like a family. You're taught from the moment you get into the program, and by the time, it's why when you hear older NFL players in their 30s talk about a certain rivalry, if you're Ohio State game, the Michigan game, or you're a Bama guy, the Auburn game, or Duke, North Carolina, it means it was ingrained in them the moment now it's kind of become a little, which I'm for transferring. It's awesome with the quarterbacks, but you're watching some of these games. Like I didn't think it meant anything to USC. Anything. And me personally, I know I'm not as big a Chip Kelly guy. I don't think he cares that much about the program, but like his program clearly cared more than Lincoln. And two games matter a lot to USC people. Like, are their rivals Notre Dame and UCLA?
Yep.
You know, the Utah game, the Oregon game, the Washington game, obviously, especially Oregon and Washington, they're better than you. I think people can stomach that. But to be lifeless against those two teams, imagine being the 60-year-old guy who's been cutting big checks, who's a big part of the program. Those two nights a year mean a lot to that individual. And listen, he's not going to go anywhere because of the contract, but I just don't see the fit. I don't see it working. And you have to wonder if there are a lot of people like, oh my, because at least with Chip, right, he's not the amount of money they paid him, even though I think he got a contract extension, whatever, last year. It's not nearly on the level. I mean, this is like a Jimbo Fisher level on steroids contract. So you kind of got to make this work. And it's by year. If I would have told you at the beginning of the season that they went 7-5, you would have said, well, Caleb shatters his leg early on in the season. Maybe like their defensive coordinator gets fired after week 2. You would have said insane. It would have been impossible. Like an awful year for them felt like on paper. 9-3, right? They didn't beat anybody that they should have. And honestly, they're very, very lucky to win that Arizona game They easily could be
Yes.
6-6.
Yes.
To me, they're much closer to 6-6 team than they are a 9-3 team, right?
Yep. No, Arizona had them. Something magical happens when the third quarter ends and the fourth quarter begins. The energy changes. The fourth quarter, that's where games are won. And in business, it's where sales teams become legends. The fourth quarter. That's why HubSpot built Sales Hub to give sales reps the deal-making tools they need to win in the fourth quarter and close the year strong. Sales Hub Prospecting Workplace organizes your schedule, your to-do lists, your goals all in one place to save your team time in the precious fourth quarter. Smart sequences help sales reps close deals faster than ever. Plus, AI forecasting helps you accurately predict future successes. And with an easy-to-use management tool, reps can find, track, and close deals all in one place, which means less hoping for deals and more crushing targets. Put your sales team on the fast track now to winning the fourth quarter with Sales Hub. Learn more at HubSpot.com/sales. One more college topic, Harbaugh. So the Big Ten punishment is done. I do think it will be very hard, even at home, even with a superior team, to beat Ohio State without a coach, but it's certainly possible. So the feeling, the reporting, Bruce Feldman, among others, on Harbaugh is, okay, NCAA punishment is going to be far worse. People are saying he won't be allowed next year to be on the sideline. And I'll just give you my take on that. So San Diego or the LA Chargers will not pay for Harbaugh. They just won't. That's just not what the Spanoses do. Chicago's a mess. You start looking around. Washington's interesting, but they don't have a quarterback. The idea that Harbaugh says, okay, I can't be on the sidelines next year, according to the NCAA. I lose 20 scholarships over 3 years. It's a pretty stacked roster, even with their NFL losses. This is now a completely two-team. It's a two-team conference. Oregon, Washington will be viable. USC's a mess, and UCLA is not in Michigan's class. And I thought I could see Harbaugh saying, hey, I got my kids. My dad lives next to me in Ann Arbor. I'm gonna stay here. I did the NFL. I got to a Super Bowl. Is that my legacy now? I'm not leaving Michigan, and it wouldn't hurt him if they don't win the national championship. You can't take it from him. If you vacated wins, that never dinged Pete Carroll. Nobody gives a rip about that. If you don't let him be on the sidelines, I think you and I would agree they'd still win 10 games next year. I mean, the key is coaching. That's the key. It's the week. It's the preparation. It's not the management of I mean, Harbaugh isn't a guy barking in a headset throughout the course of a game. He's not. He's very much a mentor to his. He coaches coaches.
He doesn't call the plays, Colin. He's a figurehead kind of.
Right. It's not like Lincoln Riley's are calling plays.
No.
That's not what he does. In my takeaways, they'd win 10 games without him on the sideline. They wouldn't beat Ohio State and Columbus next year. But I think they get Penn State at home. The schedule is pretty favorable next year. Your thoughts on they end up either winning the Natty or finishing second. Georgia's playing very well right now. He stays through fairly punitive discipline because his takeaway is, this is my legacy and I'm going to stick it out. I think a lot of people believe he's going to the NFL. I do not think there's many good jobs. I think the Chargers is it, and I don't think they'd hire him.
Yeah, I think there's two things. On the big picture with Jim Harbaugh, I do think he's kind of just found his role. Michigan's embraced him finally. It really works. He always kind of has that chip on his shoulder naturally, and now they got it back again when they're playing, and he's built the best team that he's had since he's been there, obviously, and he's going to have moving forward. You got the kids all wearing the shirts. Like, it's kind of perfect for him. So yeah, I'm with you. I think there's a very good chance, and clearly what he means to them, for them being this good, it's a $12 million coach. Even if he gets suspended, who cares? Right? No, when you got an elite guy, like it does not matter. And clearly they have no chance to upgrade, so they are going to have to throw an enormous contract in front of them, which clearly they already had. And then this came up. I don't think that's going to change anything. The Raiders would be the one curveball. But even today, they lost, but Antonio Pierce has proven to be I think it's much easier for Mark Davis just to roll with him, not pay as much, and just take a deep breath.
For a couple years.
Yeah, I think Antonio Pierce has like the lead on that job. So I'm with you. The Bears and Chargers would be out. Short term, though, this quarterback's making me a little nervous because we all anointed him. He looked really good. The Penn State game, he's kind of got some 2019 Jimmy Garoppolo vibes right now. They don't trust him. He threw a terrible pick in the Maryland game in the red zone. They didn't have him throw a pass the previous week, partly because they didn't need to, but also, is this guy playing his best football right now? So the way he's playing, do I trust them without Jim on the sideline, even if he is just their motivation style, makes me a little nervous. But I do think this is going to be Jim's finest hour this week. I mean, He's back to the 49er gaze, to the peak when they beat Pete Carroll was a 41 point. It's not the game, it's what he does leading up. I think you're going to get him. That place is going to be going bananas.
It will be the highest rated college football game maybe since USC Tech. I mean, it could be 15 million.
I looked it up this week. 17 million people watched the 22 game, which was the highest rated game in a decade. So if 17 million watched last year, I mean, are they getting 20 this year? I mean, that's like an NFL Monday Night Football game or something. That's an enormous.
Yeah.
Watching football today, because I'm guilty of this. Oh, the Giants should just lose. Like the Packers just mail it in. The one major difference, the NBA has really battled the tanking. No one tanks in the NFL. Even the shitty teams give you. The Giants are rolling out Tommy DeVito, who diehard football people couldn't point out of a lineup, and they're playing their ass off against a divisional opponent. The Bears today, are giving you everything they have against a Lions team that's going to win 13 or 14 games. Listen, we can talk all we want about the product, these quarterbacks getting injured, but at least on any given game, regardless of the opponents, you get everyone's best effort. It may not always result in wins, but there's no we're just going to mail it in today, or right. This guy's not going to play, or this coach doesn't give a shit. That's not the case with the NFL at all. And that's, to me, a big variable that has helped separate the NFL is baseball and basketball just give up on the season, a quarter of the way in.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You said that on J.J. McCarthy. I'm not a huge fan. I'm not. I think he's undisciplined. I don't necessarily love his personality. If you told me today who I had to pick in order, it would be Caleb. I just want to dig deeper on Drake May. Penix, Bo Nix. The kid at Duke is interesting again. Let's just wait and see what transpires. I am not a J.J. McCarthy fan. First of all, he misses some easy stuff. By the way, Matt Stafford did today. They do. Like he misses easy stuff. But that I don't worry about Harbaugh not being on the sideline against Ohio State in Ann Arbor with this roster. I worry about J.J. McCarthy. I'm just not sold on him. I think he's loose. I think he's a little cocky. I think he misses easy stuff. I'm not a big fan.
Well, think about this too. The majority of their games these last couple of years with him as a starter have been pretty easy, right? When you watch Penix and Bo Nix, those guys have been.
Penix is in wild games every.
But going back to Indiana, he has played in games where to just put his team in position, he had to be unreal. For the most part, J.J. McCarthy, some of these lines, they are beating the living what out of just these teams that have no shot the moment they get off the bus against Michigan. So you get in some of these tight spots. It's like, God, does this guy even know what he's doing? And he does not feel as confident. He does not feel as calm. I also think we're too quick to this guy has to come out. Maybe this guy should just stay in college all 4 or 5 years, however long he has eligibility. He's still an underclassman. He doesn't have to come out in the NFL. So at one point in time, people were talking about this guy being a top 10 pick. To me, he is not remotely close to that now. And obviously this week is enormous. And some of these playoff games, if he plays in them, will be huge. But that Maryland game, and even going back to the Penn State game, what they didn't have him do, I think is very reflective of their trust in the guy right now. And you can't tell me, and I don't even know what the parameters are of the suspension, but that Harbaugh didn't text someone at halftime of the Penn State game and said, we're not throwing the ball. Kyle Shanahan, NFC Championship, they cannot move the ball, run the ball every play. Do not let our quarterback screw us and give them a fumble 6 or a pick 6. They are not scoring the ball. And I think it was a little, they didn't have a choice this week where they had to have throw a little bit, and you're just holding on for dear life.
All right. Almost an hour. John Middlekauff, former NFL scout. He's at the Volume 3 and Out. He'll be all over Thanksgiving weekend. I will as well. All exciting stuff. As always, my man, we talked a little Packers and Chargers, some Justin Fields, Detroit and Chicago. For the record, got to give Detroit credit. They've lost that game for 50 years. They were outplayed, didn't play well, fell behind. The fact they came back and dominate the last quarter, they haven't done that my entire life. Like I said to myself, okay, this is a different Detroit team. They've lost that game every single time. They get outplayed, it's over. This is a totally different Lions team.
Stat of the day. They're 8-2. It is the best start for the franchise since 1962. 1962. That to me shows he, at this point in time, is the lock coach of the year, right? Given the franchise that he's taken to be even if they end up with a 3 seed, I don't care. You win 12 plus games for the Detroit Lions. What a year. What a game.
Have a good Thanksgiving, buddy.
See you later, Colin. You too.